The election's underway. Early voting records smashed across the country.
Let's bring civility back to our conversation.
Lately, we've been doing that just because we want to get it out of the way.
The most heated races coming to a head. From New York's Lawler versus Jones.
2 years ago, this race was determinative of the outcome of control of Congress, and it will be again.
Every single vote is going to matter when it comes to the future of this country.
To Tom Kean Jr. versus Sue Altman in New Jersey.
We're at this position because of the extreme policies of the early Biden years that have caused this, and my opponent supports every single policy tax increase.
Trump actually put into place, he took away the SALT deduction, which was a thing that I think New Jerseyans and New Yorkers know very well, and he took it away as a retaliation against blue states.
Local races with national impact. Control of Congress hangs in the balance. What local results indicate about the presidential outcome. Everything you need to know ahead of Election Day when Picks on Politics starts right now.
This is Picks on Politics.
And welcome to Picks on Politics, everybody. I'm Dan Manarino, and the 2024 elections, they are certainly underway, right? Early voting happening across the tri-state and the country, surpassing records that were set in 2020. So in just the first weekend alone, 250,000 people voted in New York City. Polls remained open all week and into the weekend, all leading up to the pivotal Election Day, which of course is on Tuesday. And as voters make their voices heard, we await the results of one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime. In New York, New Jersey playing a pivotal role in the control of Congress. So today we have complete analysis of the races to watch, whose results are coming down to the wire. And let's get right into our picks panel. And joining me right now, PIX11 political reporter Henry Rosoff, Politico reporter Emily Ngo, and PIX11 New Jersey political reporter Jim Vasil. So great to have all three of you here. Emily, for your first appearance, great to have you. Let's get to some of the biggest races that we're closely following right now, one of them being District 17, guys, and that is incumbent Mike Lawler versus Democratic challenger Mondaire Jones. This has been down to the wire and a very nasty race. The ads have infiltrated people's televisions. Henry, let me begin with you and the recent polling that came out from PIX11.
Yeah, we have Congressman Lawler kind of surging ahead with some of the undecideds consolidating around him. He had about a 1-point lead in some polling we did about 3-4 weeks before Election Day, and in a recent poll from just a few days ago, he has about a 5-point lead. And what's really striking here is the news cycle, and the most reported thing during that time was the blackface controversy, where Congressman Lawler, there were pictures of him in college wearing blackface as tribute to Michael Jackson, who he says is his musical hero, and that's how he sort of explained that situation. So that controversy surrounding him has certainly not seemed to impact voters so far.
Yeah, Emily, and when you look at this overall, right, it is a district that he won, that Biden won handily, and in a recent poll, Harris is up and with Lawler. So what does that say about suburban voting? When you look at that, could that be how this kind of plays out across the country?
Conceivably, and this district is unique for a lot of reasons, but there are split ballot voters in this district and others around the city who may vote for Harris and Trump at the top of the ticket and decide they want a guardrail down ballot and choose, a member of Congress, a candidate of the opposite party. When it comes to Lawler and Mondaire Jones, here we have two high-profile politicians who know their way around Congress, who know their way around the cable television news circuit, and who have a lot to say. Their debates have been very bitter. There's a lot of issues. There's a large contingent of Jewish voters in the district who care a lot about the war in Gaza. There's a large contingent of Haitian voters in the district who care a lot about what Trump has to say, what Harris has to say. And Lawler is interesting because he's been walking this fine line of supporting Donald Trump, but standing up to him on some issues. And that's not, he's not doing it to the same degree. I would say he's doing it to a bigger degree than some of his colleagues, some of the other vulnerable House Republicans around the state.
Emily talks about ticket splitting. If you look over in neighboring New York 18, which has grown less competitive, but you have Congressman Ryan, a Democrat, is outpunting Vice President Harris by about 10 points. So you do see a lot of ticket splitting in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah, that's going to be something I think we start to see as a national trend. And if you're watching this on Friday, by the way, in just a few minutes, we're going to have that very debate right here between Lawler and Jones. But Jim, I want to come to you for a second right now because you cover New Jersey, and this is a very interesting race right now. Republican Tom Kean Jr., freshman congressman, who has really kind of avoided the media during his campaign cycle against Sue Waltman right now. People say, and including Governor Murphy, who said it right here on this program, he could see a flip, and this could be surprising.
Yeah, this is a huge race, not just for Democrats, but for the state of New Jersey, right? This has the most potential to be a race that comes right down to the wire. As you mentioned, Tom Kean Jr., kind of a quiet congressman, right? But his family's lineage and legacy in New Jersey politics is undeniable. His father was once the governor of New Jersey, and his family dates back to, going back hundreds of years in New Jersey. Meanwhile, Democrat Sue Waltman, the nonprofit, executive director of a nonprofit, looking to win the seat back for her party. National Democrats have gotten behind her more in recent weeks, which, if you're Tom Kean Jr., you're starting maybe to sweat a little bit. But that district, keep in mind, is drawn in favor of Kean, as we saw as proof as he defeated then Democratic Congressman Tom Malinowski back in 2022.
Yeah, but it could be a mistake that he didn't come out stronger on some of these issues.
Sure.
Especially during debates on abortion. He's avoided the topic of answering the questions specifically when it comes down to some key issues from immigration and abortion.
And what Altman has going for her is because of the redistricting that Jim mentioned. Yes, it did give Kean Jr. a little bit of more of an edge, but it's pretty much the last swing district in New Jersey. So all New Jersey Democrats, including, Democratic Senate nominee Andy Kim, can spend a lot of his time there helping them. Other, institutional Democrats in the state can really throw their support behind Altman because it's the only show in town.
Yeah. I want to go back to 2022 for a second, right? When you look at Long Island, Emily, it was split. It was 2 red and 2 blue. By the end of the night, it was all red, right? So here we go. In terms of Long Island, of course, we have the whole controversy that kind of surrounded George Santos, kind of putting this laser focus on Long Island. But now there's this seat that was Anthony D'Esposito facing a tough challenge right now by Laura Gillen. And the polling that came out recently had Laura Gillen up, but there was a bit of controversy with D'Esposito along the way. Did that affect, do you think, his candidacy?
A little bit. This is her closing argument now, is her allegation that he's been corrupt in every job he's ever held, as a cop, as a town council member, as a member of Congress, and as a candidate. Does that impact the polls? It depends on who you're talking to. This district is heavily Democratic. It's very racially and religiously diverse, and she's been out there these last couple days with her fellow Democrats currently in Congress, just working these electorates. And he's been rallying Republicans. We know in Nassau County in particular that there's a pretty vaulted ground game and operation that stood up to George Santos, but also has helped win some of the local and state seats that have made for these red waves over various elections that have made Long Island a little redder than the Hudson Valley is.
Right, and people are saying that the balance of power in Congress could really come down to these seats in New York, and this is one of the potentials that could flip.
Right, and that and maybe 1 or 2 others, and that's to step back and set the scene. That's really why New York and California and New Jersey, to some extent, are so crucial, because the path to determining which party controls the House next year runs straight through these seats. In that race that we were just talking about in New Jersey, in these races in New York and some in California, there has been a surge of spending, not just fundraising by the candidates, but outside spending, independent expenditures, including by the Democrats' House Majority, PAC, and the Republicans' Congressional Leadership Fund. We are seeing, according to Politico's data crunching and reporting, the spending in 2024 much higher levels than 2022, because the Democrats are trying to learn their lesson.
Well, just look at the television ads, for example. I mean, the television, you're not watching a TV show anymore without watching ad to ad to ad. Real quick on Long Island, Henry.
Sure.
John Avlon hoping to take the seat from Nick LaLota. What are the chances here? Because the polling right now is in LaLota's favor.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough. We talked about New Jersey redistricting. Let's talk about New York redistricting for a little bit. Democrats got their wish and got to draw a fresh map, but were very conservative in how they did it. And in fact, they up LaLota just a little bit in exchange for going after some other seats. So they didn't do themselves any favors out on Long Island. LaLota has, in all the polling that we've seen, been ahead. But it's a district that is purple, getting redder, so it's not out of the question, but it's a tough road for Democrats.
That's on the congressional side of things, and I'll come back to that in just a second. But Jim, I want to jump back across the Hudson to New Jersey and take a look at the Senate race right now between Andy Kim and Curtis Bashaw. Both of them were here on PIX11 multiple times, making their case along the way, and Curtis Bashaw says this is going to be the biggest political upset in New Jersey that you've seen in some time. However, there hasn't been a Republican in the Senate for over 50 years.
52 years to be exact, and that's incredible. You think about that going back to 1972, I believe. But yeah, it's just a fascinating race because New Jersey is going to have a new voice in the Senate for the first time since 2013. Of course, Senator George Helmy holding down the fort in Washington right now in the Senate on an interim basis after being appointed by the governor. But Republican Curtis Bashaw, a moderate looking to win over swing voters, and then Andy Kim, who's a congressman in South Jersey. You know, it's fascinating because he's really made a name for himself in this election cycle, not only by winning the primary, but also his lawsuit fighting the controversial county line ballot in New Jersey as far as the Democratic primary ticket. So it's going to be interesting. Kim, though, pretty consistently leading in the polls up to Election Day.
And by double digits in the last poll that just came out here. And one of our political pundits who had been on this show had said it was tough to go. The biggest challenge for a Republican going against Andy Kim was that Andy Kim is tough to paint as somebody who's negative because they were saying he's an all-around wholesome guy. I want to talk about this 2022 rematch in New York again. And Emily, this is where you're going to be on election night, right? Mark Molinaro's race. Josh Riley going up against Mark Molinaro. And this was a surprise win for Republicans. So what are you expecting? This race not covered heavily. So what are you seeing in terms of how this might shape out?
So Mark Molinaro and Josh Riley, and then Anthony D'Esposito and Laura Gillen are rematches, and they're bitter rematches. This one you're talking about in the 19th Congressional District, especially bitter. When the one debate they had, they were talking at each other almost the entirety of the debate. Very hard situation for moderators. You wouldn't have had that problem, Dan. But a lot of border security is a huge issue in this district, and abortion is as well. And this is where they're clashing, and it gets pretty nasty, but it is in this in-between area, and it's been an expensive race because it actually covers 5 news media markets. So
runs along the whole southern tier, right? Yeah.
And I think it's one of the top 10 most expensive races in the country at this point. But Riley is a former attorney with the U.S. Senate who has worked on some border security measures, and that's what Molinaro's been attacking him on. Molinaro been in government since he was 19, actually.
This could potentially flip.
Could potentially flip, yes.
Real quick, predictions, control of the House and Senate.
I think it's very 50-50 right now. It was looking very clearly like Democrats were going to at least take it by a seat or two, and I think it's anyone's guess at this point. Republicans very likely to take the Senate.
Now, I hate predictions because I don't like to be wrong.
I know.
But Dem control the House, Republican control the Senate.
Okay.
It really is a toss-up, especially looking at NJ7. And keep in mind, keep an eye out for how Trump and Harris do in that district as well, that suburban, affluent, relatively affluent district.
Okay. Great to have all of you here. Henry, Emily, Jim, good to see all of you, and follow them all on election night. And as we mentioned earlier, New York City set to have early voting records in the first days of polls opening, right? There's still time to cast your vote before Election Day. Next up, I'm sitting down with the New York City Board of Elections to discuss what voters need to know. We'll be right back.